So we are live. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chris. A pleasure to have you today. By way of introduction, let me present you to our esteemed audience here on LinkedIn Live. This is a series of interviews I conduct on topics that are of interest to our CUNY SPS community. And today we are very fortunate to have Professor Chris Kangas join us to discuss a topic that a lot of people are still trying to grasp, right? Which is this concept of blockchain and some of its applications, including Bitcoin. Some people think blockchain and Bitcoin are the same thing. They aren't, as Professor Kangas will explain momentarily. But we're really, really delighted to have you, Chris. So by way of introduction, I'd love to give you the opportunity to share a little bit of your journey. How did you get to where you are today? What's a little bit of the background, and how blockchain and Bitcoin have become of interest to you?
Great. Good morning, Jorge. Thanks for the intro and for inviting me. And I'm just delighted to work with such an esteemed institution as CUNY is, and being so important to New York City and to students, giving opportunity to students here and across the city to advance their career and their life. And so for me, so I've been working for many years in the payments industry and the money moving industry, having worked at Citibank, at Chase, at MasterCard, and in a lot of different capacities, working in remittances, in money transfer services, in card payments, even in check processing. My very, very first job in New York City, way back when, was
when people use checks.
Yeah, checks. Was repairing accounts whose checks were destroyed in the check sorting machines in the back office of the bank. And now, all this has evolved and it's all done digitally, and it's a different process. But in those old days, yes, that was my humble beginnings in this amazing space of payments. So my last gig was with MasterCard before I left to start working in academia. And I had a role managing partnerships with e-commerce companies and companies behind them that support the business. Based out on the West Coast. And so a lot of the work that we were doing was to drive more secure payments ecosystem, working with the merchants like, Netflix and Amazon and PayPal, other service providers like Stripe and so on, Shopify, to push forward the evolution of security, of identity, of better ways of moving money faster, easier, and economically to the benefit of, merchants and also for the buyers, the consumers. So
you have seen the entire evolution, or a good portion of the evolution of the payment system, the financial payment system, from the very traditional way we used to utilize.
It's amazing.
Many years ago.
Everything. Yeah, it's like everything else. Like if we start talking about like the internet, I was looking at something last night where an old videos of Katie Couric and Bryant Gumbel on the Today Show, and they were talking about what is this internet? That at sign, what does that even mean? And that was in the 90s. I mean, that wasn't that long ago.
And actually, this is a good segue to tell our audience, some of which might not be familiar with CUNY SPS, what we do or what we specialize in. SPS stands for School of Professional Studies, and we are the premier institution within the CUNY system serving adult learners. So imagine that you started your academic career, but life got on the way, whether it was financial or job or family related, but you had to stop your career, and now you want to come back. CUNY SPS offers over 28 degrees or programs, most of which are fully online. So that gives the flexibility to students who are working full time, and we try to bring to our student body the most current, most up to date topics and disciplines, and that's why in the case of Professor Chris Kangas, we decided to create a course on the topic of blockchain, which includes aspects like Bitcoin, but many others. And I thought it might be an interesting subject matter for this series of interviews. So, Chris, if we could start by maybe defining what is, some people still confuse blockchain and Bitcoin. Some people are not familiar at all with the term. So let's imagine that most of the members of our audience have heard of the concept of blockchain and or Bitcoin. Maybe they think it's the same thing. Maybe you can start by clarifying what the difference between those two is.
Yeah, happy to make my best attempt at a very complex topic. But like you, I have had a lot of blank stares. Most people know what Bitcoin is. Many people in the United States have purchased cryptocurrency. They've heard about NFTs and things like that. So there is sort of a general familiarity with the idea of a cryptocurrency or an NFT. But I think what is lost on most people is the underlying technology that is underpinning cryptocurrency and NFTs and other assets that can live in this digital virtual kind of world. And so that technology is blockchain. And blockchain, one could think of it sort of like the operating system, the iOS or the Windows platform on which applications and assets can sit and can run. And so you can think of cryptocurrency kind of like an app sitting on top of iOS or something like that. Cryptocurrency is sort of the most famous app, if you will, if we follow the metaphor. But there's so many other digital assets that can have been invented by now after almost 15 years of this whole concept being a thing. So it has evolved rapidly. There are hundreds of companies. There's more than 20,000 cryptocurrencies that have now been created. It's the environment in this blockchain space has become.
I'm sorry to interrupt. How many you said have been created?
20,000 plus.
20,000 different types of cryptocurrencies. Oh, wow.
It's incredible. I know. There's been
Bitcoin is the most famous, but there are 19,000 more.
That's right. And also to know about blockchain is that there's not just one. There's many blockchains. And so Bitcoin sits on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. And the blockchain is really helping to keep track of the ins and the outs of all of the trades and who owns the Bitcoin at any moment in time. So on top of it being sort of this operating system, this gigantic sort of global and distributed computer, it is also acting as a ledger, keeping track of everybody's ownership of those assets. So Bitcoin sits on the Bitcoin blockchain, but you have many other cryptocurrencies and also many other blockchains. The next, maybe most famous one is Ether cryptocurrency, and it sits on the Ethereum blockchain. So that's another example of a blockchain and a coin pairing.
So if I am using Bitcoin, some of the concerns a lot of users have is how secure is this thing? Can I rely on Bitcoin to be a currency that will be protected? Can I lose my money on Bitcoin? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about security when it comes to this topic. And as I think most people who read the newspaper have seen, there have been many scandals and tough times over the last year. FTX is the most recent one, I guess you could say the Silicon Valley Bank meltdown over the weekend had some tangential relation with the cryptocurrency world, with one of the big stable coins, USD coin, having a lot of its deposits sitting with Silicon Valley Bank. So there was a great concern that huge currency was going to melt down.
So maybe I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt.
Right. No, go ahead.
To clarify on my question, Chris, maybe since you know and have had experience with other ways of sending payments, and we have a question on the chat from Abu Bakar regarding the blockchain play in the remittance market. Since you can compare and contrast, would you say if you're sending a wire transfer, say you are an immigrant and you're sending money back home, but you're sending it via a more traditional method like Western Union or one of those wire services, vis-a-vis sending it via Bitcoin, which is safer? If we can't say one is safer than the other.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to, the on-ramping and the off-ramping of the money, and the point of the points of failure along the journey of the money moving. So if I'm logging into, let's say, Coinbase to buy some Bitcoin and then move it over to the account of my relative in another country, the relative ultimately wants to perhaps use the money. They're not just going to have it be a store of value and a savings account. They might actually need the money to spend. So they're going to have to off-ramp that money from Coinbase or whichever platform they're using to receive the money. And so there are these little points of failure in the journey that are not, they're not the blockchain. They're the tangential sort of engines that help people move the funds into and out of the blockchain. And those can be points of failure if they're not managed well. Just like so many other hacks have happened with all sorts of different companies and merchants and hospitals and everything else. Computer systems are vulnerable and applications can be vulnerable. And so strengthening, identity verification and other things that we do when we log on to platforms these days with two-factor authentication and so on can help minimize, risks.
So when you use the term off-ramp, should we think of that as the equivalent of a withdrawal from our bank account?
Yeah. If you so as you kind of probably can guess, Bitcoin isn't widely accepted anywhere in the real world as a payment currency. There are some things happening in that domain, but mostly if you want to spend Bitcoin, you're going to have to convert it back into what's called a fiat currency, which is your everyday currency like the dollar or the euro or whatever your local currency happens to be, and then you can spend it as you like. And so that act of converting is something that in this industry is called off-ramping.
Okay. And I've seen, at least in New York, I've seen what look very much like ATM machines. Maybe they are ATM machines that allow you to get money from Bitcoin. Can you? This is
how
that works.
This is how things are evolving. People are. I see an enthusiast in the comments section here, and people are fascinated by this space, trying to understand how to get into it. And so some have created these ATMs where you can insert dollars and basically buy cryptocurrencies in that way, rather than having a Coinbase account or another type of cryptocurrency exchange relationship. And
can you do it in the reverse? Can you get dollars from that Bitcoin ATM or not?
I don't know. I actually haven't experimented. If somebody in the conference here knows the answer to that, I'd be curious to know that. I haven't used it. Yeah. I haven't even seen one live in the wild, actually.
Yeah. I've seen a few in New York City, but as you said, it's a mechanism to buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I haven't attempted to withdraw any.
One
But
of
this
the
is interesting.
interesting things, one of the interesting things, Jorge, just thinking about this banking situation that we're all witnessing right now with Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, is that Bitcoin value has actually gone up by almost 20% in value over the last 24 hours.
Oh,
And
really?
so,
It seems counterintuitive. But how
yeah,
come?
well, yeah, I'm kind of guessing at why this is happening right now, that it's directly somehow linked to this, but one of the real impetus and reasons for having blockchain and cryptocurrencies from the very beginning, about 15 years ago when this all started, was the idea of creating an independent electronic global cash, a currency that could be a little bit safer than some of the currencies that we're used to using that are subject to governmental monetary policy and other things that could harm people in certain countries where inflation has been a real challenge. And so why not have a safe haven, something that is like the dollar, which has been known as a safe haven currency, but accessible to anyone, anywhere in the world at any time. And so this is what, how Bitcoin sort of emerged, was as sort of this safe haven for people in the world. And so I'm kind of wondering if, some people are moving assets around trying to find a safe haven. And, Bitcoin and each cryptocurrency that exists among the thousands that are around, they all have their own rules and sort of protocol for how they work. And you have to pay really close attention to that when you're buying these cryptocurrencies. There's usually white papers that are attached that explain the rules of the road for that particular currency. What Bitcoin is no different. And one of the very interesting things about Bitcoin is that there's ever only going to be 21 million Bitcoin mined and available in the world for the life of Bitcoin. So in that respect, Bitcoin becomes sort of like digital gold, where there's sort of a limited quantity available. And so its value will sort of be supported by the fact that there is scarcity. It's
one
just
thing sorry, I was going to add, one thing I have heard from colleagues here in New York is many investors already considered cryptocurrency a separate and additional asset class for purposes of investing. So the same way you keep stocks and you keep bonds and you keep real estate and you keep art, you also keep cryptocurrency. And I wonder, with all the discussion in DC about the debt ceiling and whether the U.S. will not be able to honor its debt come July or August, I think is the latest deadline the Department of the Treasury has mentioned. If that would have an implication in terms of the value of cryptocurrencies, that might at some point replace even the U.S. dollar as the fiat currency worldwide.
Boy,
that will ever happen?
If those days come, Jorge, we may have bigger problems if the U.S. defaults. But I think that there is that psychological sort of feeling, like the what if scenarios, and some who are more risk averse may worry about that and want to have some diversification. I think it's really important to mention, by the way, that we're not here to give any investment advice whatsoever. You and I.
Important disclaimer. Yes.
Yeah, very important disclaimer.
I'll put all the legalese on the comment section. Just
there you go. There you go. As I think everybody knows, this whole space has been super volatile. And just maybe a little over a year ago, the whole value of cryptocurrency was somewhere in the range of $3 trillion. and now it's worth $1 trillion. So there's plenty of people who have lost a lot of money on this volatility and this sort of reset of where these currencies are valued right now. So
I see another question on the comment section from Carlos. He says, Bitcoin going up during the latest financial crisis. Is this in any way related to less trust in traditional banking? And you were alluding to this earlier, but maybe you can expand on that.
Well, yeah, I love this question because it speaks to another important attribute of why we have blockchain and why cryptocurrencies emerged. And it's the concept of decentralization. And so, you know, in my class, which I invite anyone on this call to join, we're going to talk a lot more about this. But there's been a great concern by some about how the likes of Facebook or Google or other big companies sort of own the internet. And, you know, Web3 is sort of a concept that has emerged that is aiming to sort of disrupt all of that. And blockchain and cryptocurrency, being that they're a decentralized money system and a decentralized big computer system, is sort of the tool set that can help make this decentralization possible and in a way take the power out of big companies and put it back into the hands of citizens. So that's the dream and the idealistic vision for the proponents of blockchain and Bitcoin and Web3 and even metaverse. So we're going to talk a lot more about that in the course that's about to launch at CUNY in SPS. So I look forward to.
I put on the screen a little preview or taste for what that course is.
And to that degree, you know, like to this decentralization, it doesn't just live in the digital world. It also speaks to banks who manage our accounts in a very centralized way. They're the rule setter and the one who allows us to have our funds, or maybe not, when things don't go well, as has happened in the last few days. And so in the world of blockchain, the idealists in this space envision that, you know, you've always got access to your money as long as you know where your keys are to your account. If you lose them, you're in trouble. There was a famous story about a guy who lost his wife throughout his computer. Bitcoin account were on the hard drive, and they were worth $200 million.
Oh my God!
So you got to keep track of your.
I bet there was a bit of a discussion that evening. $200 million, and there's absolutely no way you can recover, right? If you lose the key, you're out of luck.
You're out of luck, and if you share your key with somebody else, your account can be drained. So just like, you know, your ATM card has a PIN, your Bitcoin account or your Ethereum account, whichever blockchain and whichever currency you have, will have security attached to it. Some of this is abstracted by platforms like Coinbase, for example, that make it easier for consumers to deal with all of this in a way that they're more familiar with, like setting a login password and login credential and two-factor authentication. But of
course,
but
the key is a bit more complicated than the typical 4-digit code for an ATM.
They are, and they're a bit unwieldy. So it's something that people end up having to write down and keep in a safe place. And if you do lose it, you really do lose your access to the currency altogether.
So that means there might be, of those 21 million Bitcoins out there might be a number of them that will never be redeemed because they got lost. The keys got lost.
Yeah,
right.
That is correct. Some estimate as much as 20% of the 21 million Bitcoin Some of it has not been mined yet. A couple million have not yet been mined. So that's going to happen over the next 50 plus years to close the long tail of mining. But about 20% of the total is thought to be lost forever.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there's
no recovery.
20% of 20, that's well, yeah, that's, we really have only like 16 million Bitcoin out there in active use, or will have by the end of the issuance period.
Yeah.
Now we have an interesting question on the chat as well from Michael. He says, what entity regulates the blockchain?
Another fabulous question. And it's a hot topic in Washington. You read any newspaper on any given day, and you will see people like Gary Gensler or Janet Yellen or people from the SEC or from the Treasury talking about this, especially when people lose money in a big way, like with the FTX crypto exchange that melted down last September. That's been a lot in the headlines over the last few months with Sam Bankman-Fried and so on. There was sort of like a cry of, where's the consumer protection? How could this happen? What regulations are there to protect consumers from all of these risks? Because it is complicated, and the average person doesn't know what blockchain is, and they don't know how they can be protected with their crypto either. And so the US regulators have been doing enforcement actions on companies and applying litmus tests of whether a cryptocurrency is considered to be a security or not. And if so, then regulations associated with securities like stocks and so on would apply. But this is being done sort of ex post facto, like it's being enforced.
Well, the reality is that this is a worldwide used currency. So it's very hard for a particular nation state to regulate something that is so widely and universally used, right?
Yeah, it's out in the wild. It is out in the wild. Some countries do prohibit cryptocurrency altogether. And so
on the contrary, some countries have made it their national currency. I think there was a country in Central America that explored using Bitcoin as its official currency.
Well, there are some countries that have created their own cryptocurrency, like bank digital currency, actually, and it's sort of running on a private blockchain and managed by the central bank of the country. So it's not so out in the wild like Bitcoin is. And so the Bahamas is one such country that has done that and is live today. And there's a few other countries that are making plans to do something similar or are already doing. So
let me ask you, Chris, and sorry to interrupt again, but as we commented at the very beginning, this half hour goes very quickly. We're almost done with the interview segment, and it seems like we only started to scratch the surface. We could go for hours because we have only talked about one element of blockchain, cryptocurrency, but the blockchain can be used for so many other services. I can imagine, for instance, instead of having a title company insuring the title of my house, having the blockchain used for that purpose, so that a transaction, the sale of a house, could be done much quicker and safely than it is today. So I imagine there are many other uses. So from the get-go, I will say we will need to have a part 2 or even a part 3 of this series of interviews. But before we say goodbye, I do want to give the public an opportunity to know where can they reach out to you if they want to reach out to you. Is there a preferred way in which you would like to, if someone has a question
Yeah, I'm happy to be contacted at CUNY at christopher.kangas@cuny.edu, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'll be posting on LinkedIn a link to the blockchain introduction to blockchain course. It's only a 10-hour commitment across 5 weeks. So you'll learn a lot. And many of the things we talked about here today we'll be going into more deeply in this course.
Fantastic. I put the email. Can you check if I spelled it correctly?
Yep, that looks good.
Okay, so that's your email at CUNY SPS, and we will be putting on the comment section of this interview more information on how you can enroll on Professor Kangas's course. It's free, and that will be offered in the next few weeks. So more information to come there. As Chris mentioned, he will also publicize it in his LinkedIn profile. And what's your username on LinkedIn? I can add that to the comment section as well.
Oh boy, that might be the one question I'm not quite sure of. But if you search for Chris Kangas, I'm sure you'll find me straight away.
Fantastic. Yeah, I don't think there are many Chris Kangas.
I'm listed as Chris Kangas. Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, not Chris, too many,
thanks
but
so
there
very
are some.
much. This has been wonderful, very illuminating. I think we have left the audience with a lot of interest in the topic. So we will definitely have you back.
Thanks so much, Jorge. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.